Hello, is this any better?
All right, folks, we're going to get started with the LitFest at Night event. So if you are here to listen to our Lighthouse faculty read, I'd love for you to please come forward in the seats. If you are wanting to chat with folks, please go ahead and do that outside so that people who are attending the reading can hear everything. So welcome. Again, I'm Julia Marquez Upman. I'm the intern here at Lighthouse. This is LitFest at Night. We'll be featuring 6 readers. For folks watching online, just please be aware that you are not on camera or mic. And there are links in the chat to all of our upcoming LitFest at Night events. Again, folks here in person, please take conversations and phone calls outside. If you'd like to purchase a book, again, those are available at Shop at Matter, our bookselling partner for this LitFest. And again, I'd like to thank SCFD, National Endowment for the Arts, Colorado Creative Industries for helping make LitFest 2022 possible, as well as York Street Yards for this space, with a special thank you again to Shop at Matter. Okay, so let's get started with our readers. Our first reader joins us virtually. Elissa Bassist edits the Funny Women column on The Rumpus. She teaches humor writing at Lighthouse, Catapult, The New School, and elsewhere. Her first book, Hysterical, a memoir about how a woman's voice develops or doesn't in a culture where mostly men talk and women are supposed to shut up, will be out in September. I'd like to welcome her. We'll work on getting her up on our screen in just a moment. There she is. Hi, Elissa.
Hi.
All right, let's welcome Elissa Bassist.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here there. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my book, Hysterical, that is out on September 13th. My mom really kindly dropped by the event space to drop off bookmarks that you can scan to pre-order if you're into that. So thank you so much. Okay. What brings you here today? The psychologist asked me. It was my inaugural therapy session at age 20. I didn't know where to start. Didn't know just how many reasons there were, or that there were so many reasons. I thought about which reason to say first. A system of society and government in which men hold the power and women don't, and also the internet, I wish I'd said. Days earlier, the Facebook.com informed me via library Ethernet that the love of my life was in a relationship with someone who wasn't me. So I signed out of myself and did what really forlorn actors do in movies. I found a nearby wall and I slowly slid down it with my head in my hand and my face arranged in despair as I projectile sobbed over the Shakespearean betrayal. Here was my torch, and pictured there was his girlfriend. I'd hung on his line, so to speak, until it was Facebook that told me we were never, ever getting back together. Classmates watched me or didn't see me, texting about Michelangelo as I hugged my knees to my abdomen and rocked back and forth on the floor until the library announced that it was closing. Life was, by sleight of heartbreak, dog shit. I managed to function, sort of, like I could walk if I felt like it, but I didn't feel like it. This is just being a person, I'd romanticized, a woman, a hungry woman. But no one called me a hungry woman. She's a crazy psycho bitch, I'd overheard one classmate say. Back at the dorms, I saw posters for a place called Mental Health Services, and I needed help. But for what? For this? For crying a lot? Over a boy? For acting my age and genus, 20 and human? For wanting and for needing? Because I felt crazy for feeling how I felt? I'm in love, I finally told the psychologist as my reason. Unreciprocated, I added, and didn't stop for the full session. Oh, to talk. And the other person, an employee, had to listen and had to help and had to fix everything. Is there anything else you want to talk about? She asked me months later. You talk about boys an absurd amount. It was true that I consistently failed my own Bechdel test. But I was raised to talk and to think about boys above all, to have boys be my response to how are you? More than is normal, I asked her. I was thinking of the medical history form I'd filled out to see her that had me circle my title, Miss or Mrs. or Ms. Is not married or is married or was married. My relationship status was my identity. What is normal anyway? She asked, and then she diagnosed me with depression. If I lived in other centuries, the Greeks would diagnose me with having a uterus, which was the origin of all disease, according to them. And they would say it caused me to behave erratically, that is, to have emotional outbursts. The Egyptians, who were the first to use the term hysteria, would use the term on me to explain my behavioral disruptions, that is, my emotional outbursts. Medievalists would label me diseased since I didn't conform to traditional quiet femininity, that is, I had emotional outbursts. Renaissance men would call me a witch, and they would be right. By the 19th century, I'd be known as a nervous hysteric, and anything could flag me as such, like having an emotional outburst. During the 19th century, I'd be certifiable and incarcerated. In the late 19th century, Freud would deal with me like the university psychologist, with talk therapy and by treating me using my own voice. But he'd also hypnotize me into an emotional outburst and get me to admit to some repressed weird sex stuff. Today, my boyfriends would diagnose me as a crazy psycho bitch, meaning a woman scorned or unloved who is obsessed and overzealous and needy and stubborn and appears in American thrillers and horror movies and in every heterosexual relationship. She's beautiful but psycho, sweet but psycho, driven by trauma but psycho. My dog's barking, pardon him. He loves it. He's my hype man. Okay. I couldn't help but wonder in college, did I have a chemical imbalance and were my emotions diseased? Or was I just a thinking, feeling, speaking woman living in a man's world? Could it be both? It could. A woman can have it all. The label crazy psycho bitch collapses the distinction between emotional, vocal, dependent, irrational, neurotic, imbalanced, insane, hysterical, melodramatic, hormonal, oversensitive, unwell, unstable, fragile, irritating, infuriating, manipulative, vindictive, mendacious, and clinical. Until women who feel and who express feeling are associated with madness and sickness. Until vocal itself is a symptom. Until every single ex-girlfriend is a crazy psycho bitch. I know, I must sound nuts. Because the label works. Being called a crazy psycho bitch or any variant kept me quiet while keeping me crazy. Among the first conversations I stopped having were those in which I could be considered crazy or psycho or a bitch. It was just easier to suppress my moods and my sorrows and my personality. Easier to yell less and ask for less and settle for less and be less. To censor my wanting and to want less. And I also tried to suffer less, either invisibly or with a smile, so as to not provoke or inconvenience or frustrate anyone at all, ever. Thank you. And now I will shut up.
Thank you so, hello. Yes, thank you so much, Elissa. Okay, our next reader, yes. Our next reader, Andrea Rexilius, is the author of Sister Urn, New Organism Essays, Half of what they carried flew away, and to be human is to be a conversation. She's the program director for Regis University's Mile High MFA in Creative Writing. Please welcome Andrea Rexilius. Thank you. Can you hear me? Closer. Okay. For once, the microphone is right at my mouth and not at my forehead. I'm going to read just 3 poems, and I brought some artwork that's been part of the writing process for me. I've been studying with a female beekeeper who thinks of beekeeping as a divinatory practice. She's been teaching me about trance and chants that kind of invoke the bees, and part of it is related to the mythology of the bee, which is related to goddess bee mythology. So that's one embroidery that has the flight of a bee pattern. This is another one with collages that I've made. You can look at them more closely if you want to, or I'll just throw them under the podium. Okay, so the first poem is called Channel. The whole thing's from a project called Seance of the Bees. Channel. Thus spoke the violet, and spoke the trebling, in a pyre of shapes, spoke a wild bull and slain, the fire-breathing woman, self-propagating, like a water lily or locust, her son, and spoke the ravine inside her seed, bespoke her river, ravished with blood, inside her graveyard and her underbrush, already revelatory, pomegranates sewn to her cloth, spoke to the sea and to the rabbits, to the wild-eyed forest nymph uncovered by the telling, spoke the aftermath and her successors, leaves and berries sprung, and thus there were no more red hangings and no more trees lined with blood. The holly and the kerm oak and the muttering soil courted a new curse. It was then that the ground broke open to swallow them. It did not come from the sky, but spoke deep inside her insurrection, an ovum in a field of lupins manifested by snows of early spring, and bespoke the ever-opening tulip eaten by women as passage, reborn as ghosts, reborn as flower husks, as emblems as palpable and holy, unholy, with mulberry dripping from their throats. And something in the language pulsing, standing 3 stones deep in her understory, in her carrying forth of bodily imprint. Thus spoke plants and flowers to her on every hill and hive. Thus spoke the channel, ensnaring the physical, mineral thing, seeding genetic patterns, blaze and veins, where language spoke, red-toned, spoke a brush fire, all organs bridged, spoke a flower inside her flower's telling, spoke corpse of grief, spoke infinite strums in the heat space, spoke caesura, remote and mountainous, inside her body, a petalite more species, awake, below. Okay, then 3 short poems that all have the same title. The Structure of a Flower. The day the deer died, I was alive in my house. I was alive in a watery field of glaciers, in the realm of birchwood in my throat. The day the robins wept, the day foxes ran from the woods on fire. I was alive in a decade. Sometimes dreaming of another region was my religion. It was a place before trees, prior to the flame. When the deer died, I was in my house dreaming. Then the drought came, cessation of sound, flames as red as apples lodged inside my throat, hissing. The structure of a flower. The way the heat was, the way the migrating butterfly was, the way the sky was, the way the garden was, the way the hand taking the body's temperature was, the way the cactus was, the way the symphony was, the way the water strider was, the way the sympathy was, the way the country was, the way the house was, the way the soil was, the way the language was. The structure of a flower. Women are an omen opened. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next reader is also joining us virtually. We can get her pulled up. All right. Caryn Mirriam-Goldberg was the 2009 to 2013 Kansas Poet Laureate and is the author of 24 books, including How Time Moves, New and Selected Poems, Miriam's Well, a novel, Needle in the Bone, a nonfiction book on the Holocaust, and The Sky Begins at Your Feet, a memoir on cancer, community, and coming home to the body. Founder of Transformative Language Arts, she's a beloved writing workshop facilitator and writing and write livelihood coach. Please welcome Caryn Mirriam-Goldberg.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I want to really thank the previous readers and the readers to come. I'm just loving your work. I'm coming to you from Lawrence, Kansas. And having just had to evacuate a giant event with 7,000 people because of a tornado warning, I'd like to start with this poem from my book, How Time Moves. Being made of weather, you have no idea what you're capable of. The rotation born of two opposing forces can explode down Main Street in any town, any mind. Fight the front moving through, give up and sleep through the storm. Choices as if they're choices. When it's time to ask yourself, what are you ready to give up and what can you save? Dead phones, live animals, a teacup from great-grandmother, a pink-gray arrowhead found near an Ozark lake in 1983 when someone taught you to skim stones. Mostly the hand of the child you lead into the cellar. Mostly your own heartbeat, audible as hard breath, which you must protect and give freely as light or water. Always the will to return to the moment the storm brings you back out to see what you're truly made of. Lift the fallen branch or plank, bend to call out a name, your whole life waiting for the smallest of motion. This next poem is called Your Body is a Conversation with the World. What are you waiting for? From the first air in the first room where a winter radiator breathed enough warmth for you and your mother, the world was chatting you up. You gasped, you cried, you waved your tiny hands for the ocean you left, and the story laughed itself silly in each cell until it multiplied into a million more, marching to or denying the heart's measured drum. Your body watches the moth on the other side of the screen, drinks the water from the blue glass and jumps in its sleep. So much dialogue in this continuing tender reckoning of barefoot on gravel, whippoorwill telling the ears of nightfall. You're always in conversation about how you're not a separate animal, but a talisman of your own place, alongside the freeway and the prairie. Each step, another word, each shrug, another question for the lightning bug caught on the ceiling, the cat leaping from refrigerator to your shoulder, the wind or its absence evident in the grasses. The answers may knock you over or have nothing to do with the question you're pacing across the day. Time tells its stories through your body, so yoked to the slug that it cannot stop singing. And this last poem I'm going to read has several subsections, and so I'm going to snap my fingers between them. And it's one of those poems that started at 15 pages long, and after 2 or 3 or 10 years, got much shorter. The opposite of certainty. The Hubble telescope shows us a star dying, a green butterfly in a tube of black. At the center, bands of pink burn thousands of years down to one cell. Everywhere the telescope aims, even in the dark of the dark, tens of thousands of stars dying or beginning. On the ground, where is nothing, dig deeper, still something, not just billions of cells, but air circulated through millions of beings, dying, being born, carrying on by force of light. Birth tears right through whatever stories we have for it, love too. Earth is made of dying stars, birth canal after birth canal, until death tunnels us elsewhere we have no words for, just the quick dissolving tail of a meteor, a fingerprint fading so fast it's hard to say where it was. The baby asleep on my chest afterwards, the imprint that never leaves. Dead stars turn to lightning, birdsong, mud feeding the hungry river. The dead are humidity and dirt, discord, or harmonics in our voices. Meanwhile, the living, the face you look at and think, oh, so familiar. Eyes that have looked into years of yours, seen the same colors in the retina, fires in the center, and still are never yours. All my childhood, I wanted to be certain I was worthy of being loved, which meant being saved. Like any great search, you have to begin by hollowing yourself out. Like any great love, you can't know the contours of the story ahead. But in the dark, you can toe the ground to read pebbles or sand, a way ahead, and if you're lucky, the ridge before the drop. Neurofibers in the eyes absorb light while we sit in metal chairs in our backyard under a ginkgo tree that inhales the same light. Suddenly, without knowing why, love, the opposite of certainty, calls us to our feet and trips us so we can get close enough to the ground to smell the dirt. To take air in, to give it back, a natural act, a necessity, and if we're lucky, a certainty. All along the way, the scars that weather you, and how beautiful you are when you get up anyway the next morning, put on your coat, and go out into the exploding world. Thank you so much.
No? Oh, there we go. Our next reader, Erika Krouse, is the author of the memoir, Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigation, the novel Contenders, the short story collection, Come Up and See Me Sometime, and a forthcoming collection, Save Me. Tell Me Everything was a Book of the Month Club pick and has been optioned by Playground Entertainment for TV adaptation. Erika's short stories and essays have appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, Esquire.com, Granta, Plowshares, and One Story. She has taught at Lighthouse since 2008, mentors for the book project, and is a Beacon Award winner. Please welcome Erika Krouse. Hi. I'm short. Can you hear me okay? Yep. So thanks to Lighthouse. Thanks to everybody. These readings have been amazing so far. I'm about to turn all that around. So I'm going to read from my new book called Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigation, which is about my rookie experience investigating the first ever Title IX sexual assault case in history as a private investigator. So I'm going to just start from the beginning. Chapter 1, which is called The Face. I became a private investigator because of my face. It's an ordinary looking face, but if I ask,
How are you? Sometimes people start crying. I'm getting a divorce, they say. He ended our marriage by text. Or, I was just diagnosed with late-stage Lyme disease. Or a man grips a packet of peas in the frozen food aisle and asks, how do you cook these? My wife died last month. Or an immaculately dressed woman suddenly tells me, I hate my job so much I want to kill myself. I've been saving up Ambiens. Then we sit on a concrete curb, or stand in line at a train station, or clutch clear plastic cups at a party as the near stranger in front of me dabs away mascara with a cocktail napkin and dumps out her mind like it's her purse, like I'm the one who can sift through the dust and used tissues to find what she's looking for. Demographics don't seem to matter. Young, old, women, men, non-binary, gay, straight, rich, poor, east, west, everyone tells me things. A woman with 26 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren whispered to me at our 101st birthday party that she wished she never had kids, that she'd wasted her life on all these people. After I volunteered at an elementary school, a 6-year-old followed me all the way to the bathroom to tell me in Spanish that her daddy's not going to come home anymore. Even as a kid, I was a storage locker for people's secrets. Grown-ups confessed their affairs, lost fetuses, traumas. When I was 7, my maternal grandmother told me her husband chased her with a knife. One of my elementary school teachers told me he was leaving his wife because she hoarded pizza boxes and dead bugs. When I was 14, my mother's friend yanked me aside and said, I just want to say your mother's a bitch. You know she's a bitch, right? When I was 17, X, my abuser, blurted that he had denied a promotion to a friend at work because he was black. This wasn't intimacy. We hated each other. I thought that was just how people were, confessing things all the time, that everyone experienced these constant revelations from both kin and strangers. Except people would always say, I don't know why I'm telling you this, or I've never told this to anyone before. Nobody told my older sister or younger brother these things, even though we looked similar. So it must be me, something I was doing right or wrong or neither. Something in my face bore the shape of a key or a steel table on which to lay something heavy. Where do I know you from? Strangers asked brightly. One surreal morning on a springtime park bench, 3 strangers in a row insisted they knew me as each sat down in turn. Do you work at the library? Do you know Pat? Do you eat at Dots? I said, no, I just have a familiar face. This happens to me all the time. One woman said, with that face, you must have a tough time even going outside without people bugging you. Does a familiar face imply a forgettable one? One ex-boyfriend forgot my name. This is, he said, actually snapping his fingers, trying to introduce me to his new girlfriend. Another ex-boyfriend remembered my name, but forgot we had been together for a year. What's it like to date you, I wonder? He flirted over the phone until I reminded him we did date not long ago, and he had sort of kind of proposed to me amid a wash of emotion he felt after a screening of Moulin Rouge. But how could I get mad at him? Nobody remembers a mirror. When I was 13, my family moved to Japan for 4 years. The first year, nobody seemed to understand anything I said. No, they said, waving their hands in front of their faces. No speak English. But I'm speaking in Japanese, I said in Japanese, and they stared blankly at my casual body, my oddness. At some point, without realizing it, my gestures morphed from American to Japanese ones. I covered my teeth when I smiled, nodded in short bows, kept my fingers pressed tightly together, pinned my elbows to my sides. My Japanese hadn't improved much, but people now called me fluent, pera pera. They would talk and talk and talk and talk to me way beyond my capacity to comprehend the language. They insisted I was half Japanese, half desu. My mimicry was getting me adopted. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer, even if you have to become just like them. As a child, whenever I had to take car trips with X, it was safer to sit directly behind him because he couldn't hit me without having to pull over and haul me out. Sitting there, I felt like his lesser shadow. I couldn't read a book because it made me car sick, so I spent the time memorizing the back of the head I hated most. If the car came to a sudden stop, I pitched forward until I could smell the dead skin stench of his hair, terrified I might somehow merge right into his body. Imitation isn't flattery, it's protection. There's a class of animals called mimics who pretend to be other kinds of animals to avoid becoming the delicious prey they indeed are. The powdery gray owl butterfly bears a convincing owl-eye spot on each wing, guarding it from bird attack. The harmless milk snake imitates venomous copperheads and coral snakes with bright red-orange bands to ward off predators. Their lies are their hides. Tear a mimic free from her disguise, and you'll find only inner flesh, viscera, a heart emptying its last blood into the dirt. She will die and be eaten, unless she learns how to rip off your disguise first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next reader, Tiffany Quay Tyson, is the author of 2 novels. Yes. 3 Rivers and The Past Is Never. The Past Is Never is the recipient of the Willie Morris Award for Southern Fiction, the Janet Heidegger Kafka Prize, the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters Award for Fiction, and the Mississippi Author Award. Shorter and funnier work can be found at McSweeney's Internet Tendency, the Rumpus Funny Women column, the Belladonna Comedy, The Establishment, Slackjaw, and more. Tiffany was born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, but is pretty smug about finding her way to Colorado, and she isn't leaving anytime soon. Please welcome Tiffany Quay Tyson.
Thank you. Erika's taking photos. Okay, this is a little tall for me. Why is that? First of all, the minute I put my glasses on, you are all this like beautiful haze, like lovely, supportive, hazy audience. Thank you. So a couple of things. I'm going to read just a little bit from The Past Is Never, which is my most recent novel. And I am sick of reading from this novel, so I just of reading the things I've been reading before. I decided I had to read something that I hadn't read before. And to do that, I had to cut this section down a good bit. And to my horror, I think it might be better. So, but I think you should probably buy the book, read it, and judge for yourself. So that's all I'm going to say. The other thing is, I spilled hummus on these glasses earlier. So if this goes poorly, let's blame that. All right. The only thing you need to know story-wise is that this story begins when 3 siblings go swimming in a rock quarry in the Mississippi Delta, and the youngest one, Pansy, who is 6 years old, disappears, does not come back. And so the remaining siblings are now searching for their missing sister and also, coincidentally, their missing father. They're going to visit their uncle to see if they can uncover what's going on. Chester lit a cigarette and sat at a small dining table. He used an old beer can for an ashtray. The trailer smelled like it hadn't been aired out in years. Stale smoke, greasy cooking odors, and the raw scent of Chester himself mingled in a terrible stench. I gagged. Willett reached back to smack me. He was right, of course. We couldn't afford to be rude. Chester didn't seem to notice the smell or my reaction. He wore a stained T-shirt rotted through where he'd splashed it with bleach. His hair was gray and coarse. Willett and I remained standing. We had no choice. The furniture in the trailer was buried underneath a layer of junk. Old newspapers, crushed aluminum cans, half-empty bags of dry cat food, cracked melamine plates with crusty bits of old beans or canned stew. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked. "We're looking for our father," Willett said. "We thought you might have an idea where we could find him." Chester laughed, and the laugh dissolved into a prolonged hacking cough. It sounded as if his lungs were working their way out through his throat. He wiped his mouth with the tail of his T-shirt, leaving a smear of yellow phlegm across the cotton fabric. He grinned. His teeth were a disturbing shade of brown. He took a drag off his cigarette and dropped the butt into an old beer can, where it smoldered. "You kids know better than to poke around like this. I can't do nothing for you." It was a mistake to come. Even if Uncle Chester knew Daddy's whereabouts, he wasn't likely to share any information. He and Daddy had a way of doing things that didn't take other people into account. "Maybe you heard about Pansy," Willett said. "She's gone missing." "I heard you two lost her." Chester sounded amused. "Someone took her," Willett said. "Do you have any idea who might want to take her?" Chester lit another cigarette. My eyes stung from the smoke. It was everything I could do to just stand there and keep breathing. You two were mighty careless with that little girl. Willett tensed up, and I thought he might throw a punch. You son of a bitch, Willett said. You know something, don't you? Chester grinned again. His stained teeth glowed. What could I know? What could I possibly know about a goddamn thing? Please, I said, just tell us how to find Daddy, or call him and ask him to come home. Can't you do that much? I was begging, and I wasn't proud of it. Desperate times. If he knew about Pansy, he'd come right home. I know he would. Chester leaned toward me in a menacing way. What makes you think so? He sounded genuinely curious. What makes you think Earl doesn't already know everything? What makes you think that little girl ain't better off wherever she is now? What makes you think your daddy gives a damn about any of this? Maybe he'll give a damn when the police track him down, Willett said. Maybe you'll be a little more cooperative when the police question you. Chester stood and grabbed Willett around the neck with both hands. The cigarette dangled from between his lips, and he exhaled smoke into Willett's face. Boy, I know you got better sense than to threaten me with the law. Let him go, I said. We won't say anything. Sure we will, Willett's voice strained. He squinted against the cloud of smoke swirling from Chester's rotten mouth, but he kept talking. The police are at our house every day, and you're a damn fool if you think they won't make their way here. They're already asking questions about our father. They're already looking for him. How long do you think it'll take before they uncover your little counterfeiting business? Chester kept a strong grip on Willett's throat, and both were enveloped in a thick cloud of smoke, so I don't know how my brother was able to make such a speech, but it seemed nothing would stop him. I noticed a hunting rifle propped behind a pile of old papers. It was out of Chester's reach, but barely. What would we do if he went for it? Was it the only gun? Unlikely. Who knew how many weapons were concealed in that mess of a trailer? You're just as sorry as your daddy said. Chester squeezed Willett's throat. A coward who won't never be a man. My brother wheezed and struggled. My stomach hurt, and my pulse thumped too fast. I sidestepped toward the hunting rifle. I got no interest in becoming a man like you, Willett squeaked. His face turned purple. I took a half step to my left, a half step closer to the rifle. It was possible the rifle wasn't loaded, but not likely. Chester was not the type of man who'd be cautious about gun safety. I'd be doing Earl a favor if I slit your throat right now. I noticed the knife on his belt. It wasn't particularly large, but I figured he knew how to use it. I couldn't stand there and watch my uncle kill my brother. I lunged for the rifle, grabbing it at the barrel from behind a stack of trash. I managed to slip my grip down and get it propped against my shoulder. I pointed it at Chester, but my arm shook. It was heavier than I had expected and longer. I put my finger on the trigger. One thing Daddy taught me early was to never aim a gun I wasn't prepared to shoot. Bert, Willett croaked, don't. Let him go, I said. Chester released his grip on Willett's neck. He laughed. That gun ain't hardly worth holding, little sister. It don't fire but every third pull. Only reason it's out is I was trying to fix it. Maybe it'll fire and maybe it won't. I worked to sound steady, though my arms and shoulders ached and my heart drummed heavy in my chest. Should we find out? Chester took a step back from Willett, who rubbed his throat with his hands. All right, we're done here, Chester said. No one needs killing today. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiffany. Okay, our last reader of the evening is Alexander Lumans. He was awarded a 2018 NEA Creative Writing Grant in Fiction. His short story, Amchitka, 3 Tests, was a distinguished story of 2020 in the Best American Short Stories 2021 anthology. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in the Paris Review, Electric Literature's Recommended Reading, Guernica, The Walrus, Gulf Coast, and Off Assignment, among others. Please welcome Alexander Lumans.
Hello. Thank you to Lighthouse, and thank you to all the fellow readers tonight. This has been amazing. Go it up. Yeah. Cool. I don't have to like shrink for it. So this is a flash story, the whole thing. You need no context for it. And it's called Horse Poor. And it's told in 4 sections. Section 4, help me make it through the night. After last night, I'm no longer allowed at the Mint Bar. You could say it's because I choked the owner's daughter up against the wall next to the jukebox that only plays cash songs, pushed her hard enough that a quarter fell from the coin slot. Or you could say she deserved it. I just wanted to huff into that cowpoke bar and demand all the dollars she owed me. Because not 24 hours ago, I found my only horse, a sorrel broodmare named Regulator, dead by the little barn. The mint owner's daughter killed Regulator. I know she dumped antifreeze onto a mess of diet dog food and then left it in a corner of my sandy pasture. It's antifreeze because I tasted it myself. It's her because she has 3 obese pugs. She's hated me since she found out her fiance and I had a month-long fling before he proposed to her. I ended the affair after a pregnancy scare. I was sicker than I'd ever been for 3 days, and somewhere in the feverish middle, I had a miscarriage. He called the sickness a gift. I knew then he wouldn't go changing into someone who'd ever offer me more than the time of day. He's as much a loser as I am now alone in my own life. Meanwhile, the owner's daughter forgives him, but acts as if I should rectify history, like time isn't already a runaway train. Section 3, one piece at a time. In no time, Regulator had once run me horse poor with her endless number of grain bags, vet fees, fencing, which meant my treadless truck tires stayed such. 40-year-old hot water heater turned 41. Holes in goddamn everything. Stuck's the right word. Only I don't know the exact hold of its permanence. After I found Regulator dead, I called the only horse mover in town, my ex-fling. Over the phone, he said he wouldn't help me unless I fucked him one more time. Otherwise, I couldn't afford him with the little capital he knew I carried. No one else in this town knows you can count to 1 million just as quickly as you can count to 1. 2, ain't no grave. On my porch, I'm replaying my failed dust-up in the Mint Bar. I chug well water to chase off the hangover while I wait for 1 million different answers to drop out of the sky. Give me a horse-evaporating meteor. Send me a reverse stork or a tainted angel. Instead, vultures circled like they know a dead horse means more. Can't dig a hole big enough for Regulator. Can't drag her grand piano body around. Being horse poor means only having the options you never wanted. My ex-fling then drives up. He's cursing the road construction like it's my fault the world needs some upkeep. He says he wants the fuck up front. When I don't answer, he feeds me his old bullshit. How he once watched an antelope run into his border fence. Barbed wire wrapped around its body like a big baby. He says he knew if he tried to help, he'd get himself stuck. So, antelope died. I tell him he's cruel. He asks if I still prefer missionary. I open and close my pocket knife until he goes peeling back toward town. Time acts differently when you do the same thing over and over. The runaway train becomes not so runaway. Out my window, I spot the caterpillar rigs awaiting tomorrow's road crew to resume whatever it is they've been failing to do for months. 1, hurt. That evening, I cross my pasture to stand before the wide-toothed scoop of a construction crawler. I clamber up into the bucket seat. The last guy didn't bother to take out the key. My ex-fling's right. Trying to get unstuck only gets you more stuck. I turn the key. The crawler shivers to life. Half confident and half deserving, I drive it to my little barn where I'm lush with death and ideas. An hour later, I park the loaded crawler in front of the mint bar. I threaten to drop Regulator's body from the scoop if the owner's daughter doesn't come out. Instead, my ex-fling shows. I tell him about the antifreeze. He doesn't smile as he says, she learned that trick from me. That's when I dump out my horse. It fails to crush the motherfucker, but her big body sticks true in the bar doorway, and I am briefly soothed by the sight. Echoes from a lone train haunt around the night, shadowing the difference between permanence and trickery. If only it would slow down enough to offer me a ride. Thank you.
All right, and with that, that concludes tonight's Lit Fest at Night event. Let's give another round of applause to all our readers, including our virtual ones, Caryn and Elissa. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.